since Nancy Guthrie vanished. The investigation is entering something of a new phase. The FBI is now finished collecting evidence from her home, but still painstakingly perusing as many as 10,000 hours of video.
For the first time, news anchor Savannah Guthrie has had to anchor her own news, and what she shared is nothing but pure tragedy. In the early hours of one Sunday, her 84-year-old mother vanished from her home without a trace, and even after 3 months, nobody knows where she is. What really happened to Nancy that morning? And how close are the investigators to bringing her home? Join us as we tell the tragic story of Nancy Guthrie. The tragic realization. The last ordinary evening of Nancy Guthrie's life took place on Saturday, January 31, 2026. She was 84 years old, a widow, a mother of 3, and a woman whose body had gone through enough to require a pacemaker, daily medication, and the kind of carefully kept routines that make a life predictable and safe. That night, predictability still held. At 5:32 p.m., she took an Uber to the Tucson home of her older daughter, Annie Guthrie, and son-in-law Tommaso Cioni. The family ate dinner together, and they played games. It was a casual Saturday evening that no one thought to photograph exhaustively because no one imagined it would become evidence. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy's son-in-law drove her back to her home in the Catalina foothills, a quiet, upscale neighborhood northeast of downtown Tucson, where she had lived since 1985. The garage door opened. It closed. That was the last confirmed activity connected to Nancy before everything changed. The next morning was Sunday, February 1. As usual, Nancy was expected at church. She had friends there, a congregation she had been part of for years, and her absence was noticed immediately. When calls to her phone went unanswered, a specific kind of alarm began to spread. When someone as old as that goes silent, the first thing everyone is worried about is whether she's still alive. But what they soon found turned worry into horror. Nancy was not in her home. Her back door stood open. Her cell phone and purse were inside the house, left behind in a way that contradicted any theory of her leaving by herself. The doorbell camera had been physically torn from the wall, and on the front porch, investigators would soon discover a splatter of blood. DNA testing later matched that blood to Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office was called immediately. Sheriff Chris Nanos arrived to begin investigating a scene that spoke of violence before it spoke of answers. Once the investigation began, they found out that Nancy's pacemaker monitoring app lost its Bluetooth connection to her phone at 2:28 a.m. that morning. The device had not merely stopped transmitting data. It was suddenly out of range, as if the phone and the pacemaker had been separated by force or distance in a single instant. There was no way Nancy could have walked all by herself with her physical limitations. The truth was very bitter. Nancy had been kidnapped. The news reached Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, early that Sunday that her mother had been forcefully taken from her home. In her first in-depth interview about the case weeks later, she described the moment her sister called with the single word, chaos. Within days of Savannah's disappearance, her siblings began posting video messages on social media. Savannah said that they believed their mom is still out there. The siblings addressed the kidnapper directly, promising a willingness to pay. The family announced a reward of $1 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery. The FBI added an additional $100,000. The videos were shared widely, covered by every major news outlet. And for a brief moment, the possibility of a resolution seemed tangible. But the silence from the other side was complete. No demands were answered. No proof of life was offered. Whoever had taken Nancy was either unwilling or unable to respond. But what about the evidence he left behind? Did it support the family's belief that Nancy was still alive? Or did it point towards an outcome too terrible to speak aloud? A ghost with a gun. When detectives entered Nancy Guthrie's home on the afternoon of February 1, they were walking into a crime scene that had already been partially sanitized by the perpetrator himself. The doorbell camera, which might have captured a face, a license plate, or a moment of recognition, had been physically torn from its mount. It was the first signal that whoever took Nancy understood surveillance and intended to leave as little of himself behind as possible. But erasure, as investigators would soon discover, is never complete. The camera was a Nest device, manufactured by Google. Nancy's family reported it missing immediately, and within days, the FBI's Operational Technology Division partnered with Google to recover data that the device had transmitted to the cloud before it was ripped away. The recovery was, by any measure, a breakthrough. At 2:12 a.m., the system had triggered a motion alert. The footage was grainy, shot in infrared black and white, the colors distorted by night vision filters that required careful forensic interpretation. But what it showed was unmistakable. A man in a ski mask approached the front door. He wore a jacket, long pants, and gloves. He reached up with a gloved hand to cover the lens, then stepped off the porch, grabbed shrubbery from the yard, and attempted to block the camera's view entirely. The FBI's forensic analysis of the footage revealed additional details that the naked eye might miss. The man carried a firearm holstered near the center of his waist, an unusual position that firearms experts noted could indicate inexperience or a specific carrying preference. On his back, he wore a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, a private label brand sold exclusively at Walmart. On February 10th, the FBI released the footage to the public along with an updated suspect description. Male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", average build. The description was deliberately broad, a reflection of how little the video actually revealed. The mask concealed everything. The gloves eliminated fingerprints. The baggy clothing obscured the body type. What the camera offered was a ghost with a gun and a backpack, and the public was asked to fill in the rest. Savannah Guthrie shared the footage on her Instagram with a caption that doubled as a prayer. "Someone out there recognizes this person." She added, "We believe she is still out there. Bring her home." The FBI had, by that point, received over 13,000 tips from the public. Every tip was reviewed. Dozens of agents worked a 24-hour command post, assigning leads and actioning information around the clock. The volume was staggering, but volume is not the same as clarity, and the mask ensured that the man in the video remained a void into which anyone could project any suspicion. In the days following the disappearance, search teams fanned out across the Catalina foothills, combing roadsides and fields within a widening radius of Nancy's home. They recovered approximately 16 gloves from various locations, most of which turned out to have been discarded by searchers or were unrelated debris. But one glove, found in a field approximately 2 miles from Nancy's residence, appeared to visually match the gloves worn by the masked suspect in the doorbell footage. DNA was swabbed from the glove and sent for testing. The results came back empty. No match in CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, which holds profiles of over 19 million known offenders. The glove's DNA was later traced to an employee at a restaurant across the street from where it was found, a dead end that Sheriff Nanos acknowledged with visible frustration. But the search teams were not only finding things on the roadside. Inside Nancy's home, investigators had collected DNA evidence that did not belong to her or to anyone in her immediate circle of close contacts. Among the samples was a single hair strand that carried the genetic signature of someone who had been inside the home and was not supposed to be there. The sheriff's office sent the DNA sample, including the hair, to a private laboratory in Florida, rather than to the FBI's National Crime Lab in Quantico, Virginia. The decision provoked a sharp public response from the FBI. In a statement released in April, Ben Williamson, the FBI's Assistant Director for Public Affairs, wrote, "Still receiving inquiries on this. This is not new evidence or information. The FBI asked to test this DNA 2 months ago with the same technology we've always had, when the local sheriff instead sent it to a private lab." Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer called the statement pretty harsh words and noted that the FBI officials seemed very irritated. Sheriff Nanos pushed back, insisting that his department had worked with the FBI from the beginning and that the private lab continues to share information with the FBI lab and other partner labs across the country. The practical effect of this detour was a delay. Jennifer estimated that retesting the hair sample could take weeks. It could even take months. The hair might not have a root, which would make analysis more laborious. And even if a genetic profile could be extracted, investigators would still need to match it to a name, a process that likely required investigative genetic genealogy, the same method that had recently solved high-profile cold cases, such as the Gilgo Beach serial killings. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore expressed confidence that the technique could yield results, calling it very important for a case so lacking in digital forensic evidence. But confidence is not speed, and speed, for a missing 84-year-old woman dependent on daily medication, was precisely what the family did not have. But then someone sent a tip that seemed to change everything. Were Nancy's neighbors hiding something from the police? The lead that went nowhere. On February 13 days after Nancy vanished, the investigation erupted into visible, kinetic action. Acting on a tip, the Pima County Sheriff's SWAT team, a multi-agency unit drawing personnel from the Marana, Oro Valley, and Sahuarita police departments, executed a federal search warrant at a residence near the intersection of East Orange Grove Road and North First Avenue, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. More than 24 SWAT, forensic, and unmarked vehicles converged on the area. Roads were blocked. Cones were set up. Media gathered at the perimeter. A neighbor, David Curl, told reporters that the woman who lived at the raided home was not permitted to stay inside during the search and spent the evening at his house, distraught, and repeatedly saying she had no idea what they were asking about. Her adult son was brought in for questioning and released. Simultaneously, FBI agents and sheriff's deputies converged on a Culver's restaurant parking lot roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home, where they surrounded a gray Range Rover. Photographs from the scene show agents erecting a thin yellow sheet around the vehicle's trunk, a measure former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer later explained that signaled officers were concerned about what witnesses or passers-by might see inside. "I believe that's because of something they saw in that vehicle," she told Newsweek. The SUV was photographed, searched, and ultimately towed away on a flatbed truck. Coffindaffer called the Range Rover the #1 lead in the investigation. As of late April, authorities had not disclosed who owned the vehicle or whether it had been released from evidence. In total, at least 3 people were detained across the 2 locations that night. All were released without charges. Sheriff Nanos described the operation as nothing more than a lead tracked down that led to a search warrant. While the SWAT operation yielded no arrests, it revealed an important development in the investigation's trajectory. The tip that triggered the raid had come from the public. The search warrant had been signed by a judge, meaning a threshold of probable cause had been met. And the fact that resources of that scale, a SWAT deployment, a multi-agency response, and a simultaneous vehicle seizure were brought to bear suggested that investigators believed they were closing in on something tangible, even if that something ultimately slipped away. But could a paper trail lead to better results than the failed searches? The paper trail. Parallel to the physical searches, investigators were pursuing a retail paper trail. The Ozark Trail Hiker Pack seen in the doorbell footage was a product sold exclusively at Walmart. The sheriff's department confirmed that they believed the suspect's mask and clothing had also been purchased at Walmart. Agents began working with Walmart's corporate security team, combing through sales records for the backpack across the Tucson metropolitan area and beyond. They also canvassed Walmart stores for surveillance footage, hoping to match a purchase to a face, a vehicle, or a timestamp that would align with the crime. The process was methodical and slow. Walmart maintains SKU-level sales data capturing date, time, location, and payment method. But isolating relevant transactions required narrowing a vast universe of purchasers into a manageable list of persons of interest. Former FBI agent Jason Pack described the strategy as a methodical effort to narrow the universe of possible suspects. But even the Walmart lead proved slippery. By early March, Sheriff Nanos acknowledged that the backpack might not have been purchased at Walmart after all. "We've now learned that maybe it wasn't purchased out of Walmart," he told NBC News. The backtrack showed a painful truth of the investigation. For every lead that seemed hot, there was a cooling period. And yet, amid all the forensic complexity, there was one piece of evidence that required no laboratory interpretation, that spoke directly and viscerally to what had happened on that porch in the early hours of February 1. It was the pattern of Nancy Guthrie's own blood. But what if her bloodshed sheds more light on her disappearance? The blood spatter. In an April 22 appearance on Brian Enton's News Nation program, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent and profiler Jim Clemente offered a detailed interpretation of the blood spatter found on Nancy's front porch. He believed that Nancy had been threatened with the gun seen holstered on the suspects. Waste. Jim said that at that point, or shortly thereafter, she realized he was trying to take her out of the house. Jim noted that when an offender decides to remove a victim from a location, it never bodes well, as it suggests the perpetrator is seeking a place with greater privacy and control. Then came the critical detail. Jim believed that Nancy fought back. He said that Nancy was hit with overwhelming force and punched in the face or the nose, and she began bleeding. The spatter, he explained, was consistent with aspirated blood, blood that is inhaled or pools in the throat and is then expelled through coughing, creating a distinctive spray pattern that is markedly different from blood that simply drips from a wound. Jim believed that after she coughed up the blood, Nancy was picked up, carried to a waiting vehicle, and positioned face up, which explained why no further blood droplets were found beyond the porch. This was not just forensic analysis. It was a portrait of an old woman, frail but not passive, facing down an armed abductor in the dark. The blood evidence did not merely confirm that a crime had occurred. It confirmed that Nancy Guthrie had not gone quietly. She had resisted. She had been struck, bled, and then she had been carried away into a silence that, more than 80 days later, had yet to be broken. But what did the messages that began arriving at media outlets reveal about the reason Nancy Guthrie was taken? And why did her family believe they could buy her back? The price of a mother. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, media outlets, including local TV stations and TMZ, received a series of ransom notes. The messages demanded payment in Bitcoin, initially setting a deadline of Thursday, February 5, and later extending it to Monday, February 9. One note demanded $6 million and threatened consequences if the family did not pay. The notes did not include proof of life, or a direct private channel for negotiation. FBI officials noted that authentic kidnapping communications typically provide a way to verify the victim is alive, which these messages lacked. Savannah Guthrie later stated that the family believed 2 of the notes were real and responded to them, but they did not send the cryptocurrency. The family initially recorded videos expressing willingness to pay, but they changed their mind when they realized there was no proof their mother was still alive. Financial disclosures revealed a significant wealth disparity that investigators have acknowledged as central to the motive. Nancy Guthrie's net worth was estimated at between $500,000 and $2 million, gotten largely from her Tucson home, valued at about $1 million, book royalties, and speaking fees. Her daughter Savannah's net worth, on the contrary, was estimated at $40 million, with an annual salary of $8 million from NBC. Combined with the assets of her siblings, the Guthrie children's collective net worth was placed between $42 million and $46.5 million. In a March interview, Savannah addressed the probability that her own fame had placed her mother in danger. That puts a lot of guilt on her, and she keeps apologizing to her mother at every chance. As of late April, many people are trying to solve the case with their own theories, leading them to trespass on Nancy's property. Nancy hasn't been found yet, but the investigators are getting closer to the masked man. What do you think the police might be missing in Nancy's case? And do you think Savannah's fame really placed Nancy in danger? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.